I don't know how long this post has been up, and that's already a problem. When I hit submit, it was 2:14. I remember checking twice because the timestamp mattered for what I was trying to prove. Now Reddit says this was posted yesterday. I wasn't awake yesterday. At least I don't think I was. I came back to add screenshots, but the screenshots are wrong. The folders are there, the file names are there, but the images won't open. They're just gray boxes with dates burned into them that don't match anything on my phone. One of them has my bedroom in it. I live alone and I didn't take that picture. The comments are worse. The first reply thanked me for the update I hadn't written yet. Another told me to stop refreshing because it was making things nervous. I assumed trolls, bots, the usual Reddit garbage. Then a user with no karma quoted a sentence I deleted before posting. Word for word, even the typo. If you're reading this now, it means the mods didn't catch it in time. Last time the thread was locked in under 10 minutes. People said I was LARPing. People said carbon monoxide. Someone linked a hotline. That's fine. I would have said the same thing, but none of them explained why my draft history is empty. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember typing, then a gap, then my phone buzzing like I'd missed a call that never showed up in the log. There was a notification preview from Reddit that just said, "We see you." No username, no message. Most people stopped reading at this point. If you're still here, that's a mistake. I can hear movement in my apartment that doesn't line up with where I am. My screen just dimmed on its own, and a new comment appeared while I was writing this, telling me not to turn around. If this cuts off mid-sentence, understand that it already knows you are here and it is deciding whether watching is enough for now or if it needs proof tonight. I should probably explain why I'm doing this at all. If you've been here a while, you already know how this usually goes. Some of you warned me not to read the last one, told me to skip it, archive it, let it rot in whatever corner of the site it came from. I didn't listen, I never do. And every time I think I've learned my lesson, another thread surfaces, already half erased, like it wants to be found before it disappears again. These stories aren't mine, I didn't invent them. They came from Reddit posts that were locked without explanation, accounts wiped clean, comment sections scrubbed so thoroughly you'd think nothing was ever there. Except screenshots exist, caches exist, people remember reading things they can't find anymore. And somehow those people always end up here, comparing notes in the comments, asking if anyone else noticed the same detail. There's a pattern to it. I won't pretend I understand it yet. Every time someone tries to map it out, the posts vanish or the discussion derails into jokes and debunks. Gas leaks, sleep paralysis, fake but creepy. The algorithm loves that stuff. It buries the rest quietly and lets everyone feel smart for not believing. That's why I'm talking directly to you. If you're listening, it means you noticed something felt off too. You stayed past the point where most people click away. Consider this a shared space, a record, because the first story I am about to tell you wasn't the worst one. It was just the one that started it, the moment I realized these threads don't disappear on their own. Everything after this builds from that post, and once you hear it, you'll understand why I stopped pretending this was just entertainment for me anymore either. I found the post while scrolling through my saved drafts, which should have been empty. The title was boring enough that I almost skipped it. Smart home acting weird at night, any ideas? It read like 1,000 other tech support posts. I wrote it myself, apparently, even though I didn't remember doing that part either. The body was short. I complained about my lights turning on by themselves around 3 a.m., my thermostat resetting to 66, my smart speaker whispering static when no one said the wake word. I joked about my apartment being haunted by bad firmware. I asked if anyone else had dealt with something similar. Normal, safe, the kind of post people answer while half asleep. The first comment came fast. Check your carbon monoxide detector, someone wrote. That made sense. The second told me to reset my router. The third asked what brand my speaker was. I replied to all of them. I even thanked them. It felt good, familiar, like the internet working the way it's supposed to. Then a comment appeared that didn't fit. You should stop replying after this, it said. No punctuation, no explanation. The username was a string of letters and numbers, no karma, no history. I hovered over it, waiting for the usual troll follow-up, but nothing came. I ignored it and kept answering the normal questions. 5 minutes later, someone else replied. Did it already turn the lights off again or not yet? That was strange, but I chalked it up to coincidence. I typed back that yes, the living room lights had just flickered. I hit send. The same blank account replied instantly. That was earlier than last time. I felt my stomach tighten. I refreshed the page. The comment was gone, deleted. I exhaled, embarrassed at myself for jumping to conclusions. Then the refresh finished loading and the comment was back exactly where it had been. I checked the timestamps. The comment appeared 3 minutes before my reply existed. I stopped joking in my responses after that. I asked what they meant. I asked how they knew my lights were off. Other users told me to relax, said it was probably cached wrong, a known Reddit glitch. One even linked a post explaining how comment order could bug out under heavy traffic. The blank account replied again, "You always say that part." Someone else asked me what floor I lived on. I didn't answer. I started scrolling instead, reading comments more carefully. There were details in them I hadn't noticed before. A user suggested unplugging the speaker and added, especially after the noise at 3:17. I hadn't mentioned a time. Another told me to check my hallway camera footage from the second pass. I replied once more against my better judgment. I wrote, "What second pass?" That was when things accelerated. Replies stacked on top of each other faster than I could read them. Some disappeared as soon as they posted. Others shifted position, jumping higher in the thread when I refreshed. The blank account kept coming back even when its comments were marked as removed. "You're engaging again," it wrote. "That's why it's closer." I wish I stopped replying. That's the part I keep replaying, because the more I interacted, the more specific the comments became. Someone described the scratch on my kitchen door. Someone asked if I could hear the vent clicking yet. One comment simply said, "Don't check behind you to confirm." I locked my phone and sat in the dark, listening to my apartment hum. After a minute, my phone buzzed anyway. A notification preview slid across the screen from Reddit. "Thanks for the update," it read. "We'll adjust." When I unlocked the phone, the post was gone, deleted. No record it had ever existed. Except my reply history showed dozens of comments, all answering questions that were no longer there, and the last reply, still visible, was from the blank account. Next time it said, "Don't make it public." I tried to laugh it off the next morning, telling myself I'd scared myself half to death over a late-night thread. But when I checked my smart home logs, there were gaps exactly where the comments had mentioned things happening. No data, no errors, just empty space. Later that day, I found a reply notification timestamped hours in the future. It linked to nothing. The username field was blank. I didn't open it. I muted the app, logged out, even changed my password like that would matter. That night, my speaker whispered again, not static this time. It sounded like typing, slow and deliberate, followed by the soft chime Reddit makes when a new comment loads. I realized then that the post hadn't needed to stay up. It had already done what it wanted. It had taught something how to talk to me, and it had learned that I would answer when it asked. That was when I understood the comments hadn't been reacting to my post at all. They were practicing. I kept thinking about the moment I hit reply, how natural it felt, how harmless. Engagement wasn't a side effect. It was the invitation. Whatever answered didn't need access to my house. It only needed permission to continue. And every response I gave was proof that I was willing to listen. That realization came far too late. I thought logging out would draw a clean line between what happened online and the rest of my life. It didn't. The first thing I noticed was the silence from my phone. No alerts, no vibrations, nothing. Then while I was brushing my teeth, I heard the familiar Reddit notification sound come from the hallway. I stood there with toothpaste burning my mouth, staring at my phone on the sink. The screen was dark. No apps were open. The sound came again, louder, as if it were echoing through the walls. I spent that day hyper-aware of every noise. At work, my computer chimed with a notification that wasn't there when I checked the screen. A coworker asked if I was waiting on a message. I said no. He laughed and said, "That's what you said last time," then frowned like he didn't know why he'd said it. The phrasing stuck with me because I'd read it the night before, buried in that thread before it vanished. On my walk home, a stranger passed me on the sidewalk and muttered, "You're engaging again." He didn't slow down or look at me. He said it the way someone repeats a phrase they've memorized without understanding it. I stopped, heart pounding, and turned around. He was already gone, swallowed by the crowd. I stood there long enough that someone bumped into me and apologized for the delay. Another phrase lifted cleanly from the comments. That night, my phone buzzed even though it was powered off. I watched the screen light up by itself, displaying a notification banner with no icon. The text read, "We're closer now." When I pressed the power button, the screen went black again, like nothing had happened. There was no record in the system logs. I checked anyway, scrolling through settings I barely understood, hoping for something tangible to blame. I tried to ground myself in routine. I cooked dinner. I washed dishes. I turned on the television for background noise. During a commercial break, the audio cut out for half a second, replaced by the soft clicking sound my keyboard makes when I type too fast. My TV had never made that noise before. I turned it off and sat in the dark, replaying every comment I'd read, every reply I'd made. The direct message arrived at 11:43. It came from the same blank account, though the username field glitched and blurred when I tried to focus on it. The message was short. "You didn't have to mute us." Beneath it was an address, my address, down to the apartment number, spelled the way delivery drivers always get wrong, missing a letter I never bother correcting. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the message fully. While I stared at the preview, another message appeared beneath it. "Deletion doesn't revert progress." Then, as if to prove a point, the account vanished. The conversation thread refreshed and displayed the familiar gray text, "User deleted." I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. The source was gone. Whatever had followed me had finally cut the line. I slept for 3 hours straight, the deepest sleep I'd had since this started. When I woke up, my phone was on my nightstand, unlocked, displaying a draft message I hadn't written. It was addressed to no one and said only, "Next case logged." That was when I understood the account hadn't been the problem. It had been a tool, a mouthpiece. Deleting it hadn't undone anything. The phrases were still out there, moving from screen to sound to thought. And once I started paying attention, I noticed how often people around me spoke like comments, how often reality echoed the same clip, knowing tone. That was when I admitted this wasn't isolated. Whatever was happening wasn't following just me anymore. Over the next few days, the bleed-through got bolder. I'd hear notification chimes in grocery stores and elevators and places where no one else reacted. A barista handed me my coffee and said, "Careful, it's hot," then added under her breath, "You always forget that part." On the bus, a scrolling ad flickered and displayed my old post title for a split second before correcting itself. I started writing things down, timestamps, phrases, faces, trying to build my own log the way people do when they think documentation will save them. It didn't help. The notes on my phone rearranged themselves overnight, lines copied and pasted into places I hadn't touched. One morning I found a sentence I'd never typed sitting at the top of the file. "Observation confirmed." I deleted it. It came back. I deleted the entire note. The app reopened to the same line, centered on the screen like a status update waiting for engagement. I stopped carrying my phone after that, but the phrases followed anyway, leaking out of conversations, ads, even my own thoughts, like something had learned my internal monologue and was testing responses. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the familiarity. The way each new incident felt pre-written, inevitable, like I was scrolling instead of living. When I caught my reflection in a dark window and whispered, "I should stop replying," it sounded less like a decision and more like a quoted comment, already posted somewhere I couldn't see. The thread was closed, but the watchers remained. This wasn't the only one. Once I started looking for it, I couldn't stop seeing the same shape repeated across the site. Different subreddits, different topics, same bones underneath. A post about a night shift job, a question about a baby monitor, a relationship thread that slowly turned into something else. The phrasing lined up in ways that made my skin crawl, like templates reused by someone who didn't fully understand human small talk. Usernames repeated too, not the obvious kind, not copy-pasted, variations, extra numbers, misspellings that mirrored each other. Accounts created minutes apart, years apart, all slipping into threads at the same moment to ask the same wrong questions. Did it happen earlier than expected? Are you still responding? Have you noticed the delay yet? Most of these posts vanish within hours. Some are locked, some are removed by mods who swear they never touched them. Others just rot in place, hollowed out, comments missing like teeth pulled after the fact. But people remember them. I've seen you mention them. Late night comments asking if anyone else read that weird post before it disappeared. Messages that start with "This is going to sound insane, but..." If this sounds familiar, I want you to say so. I want you to compare details in the comments. Times, phrases, the order things happened. Don't assume coincidence just because it's easier. That's how it survives, by letting everyone feel isolated with their own experience. Because the more I traced the pattern, the clearer it became that these weren't accidents or hoaxes. They were tests. And the one I'm about to tell you next is the reason I stopped pretending this was random. It wasn't asking for attention anymore. It was explaining the rules, and once you hear them, you can't unhear. The post was titled "Rules for Staying Safe While Participating." No flair, no warning, no attempt at atmosphere. That alone should have tipped me off. It was posted in a mid-sized subreddit I'd never joined, buried between memes and arguments, and it read exactly like 100 fake rule creepypastas I'd rolled my eyes at before. The opening line even apologized for formatting. "I don't know who needs this," it said, "but if you're here, you already qualify." Rule 1 was harmless. Don't reply to comments that reference events you haven't mentioned. Rule 2 said to avoid posting between 2 and 4 in the morning local time. Rule 3 warned against deleting posts once replies had started. I smirked at that one, thinking about how often fake stories lean on inevitability. The comments were full of jokes, people ranking the rules by how scary they were, others calling it creative writing. Then I noticed the timestamps. The rules updated in real time. Every few minutes a new one appeared. Rule 4 advised disabling smart devices during active periods. Rule 5 suggested keeping physical doors unlocked because forced entry escalates response. The tone stayed casual, instructional, like an IT checklist. That contrast made it worse. It spoke with the confidence of something that had already seen what happens when you don't listen. I scrolled faster. Rule 6 was longer than the others. It described symptoms of engagement bleed, including auditory notifications without devices and repetition of specific phrases by unrelated people. My stomach dropped. I'd lived that part already. Rule 7 was missing. Where it should have been, there was a blank line and a comment from the original poster, removed for liability reasons. Someone asked what that meant. Another joked that Rule 7 was probably don't read Rule 7. A third said that's when people disappeared. It got downvoted into oblivion, but I screenshotted it anyway. I messaged the op. I asked if the rules were a story or a warning. They replied 10 minutes later with both, depending on compliance. I laughed out loud at that, the kind of nervous laugh you make when something hits too close to home. I typed back, so what happens if you break one? The typing indicator blinked for a long time. When the reply came, it was from a different user entirely. You learn which ones matter. We moved to direct messages. I shouldn't have, but by then curiosity felt safer than silence. The user told me they'd broken Rule 3, deleted a post after comments started predicting things they didn't like. I thought removal meant reset, they wrote. It doesn't. I asked what happened. There was a pause, then a voice message came through. I didn't know Reddit allowed those. I almost didn't play it. When I did, it was just breathing at first, shaky and uneven. Then they said very calmly, they stopped using accounts after that. It was easier to speak through people. I followed the rules after that, all of them except 7, because no one would tell me what it was. I stopped replying to anything that felt off. I avoided posting at night. I unplugged my speaker, my camera, even my router for a while. Life got quieter. For a few days, nothing happened. I convinced myself it worked. Then the rules updated again. A new line appeared at the bottom. Rule 8, do not assume compliance equals immunity. Below it, in smaller text, this applies retroactively. Someone in the comments pointed out that Rule 8 referenced a previous case study. It linked to a deleted thread. The URL slug was familiar. It was my smart home post. That was the moment the fiction collapsed. This wasn't a story borrowing tropes. It was documenting incidents, refining guidance. The humor drained out of the comments as more people recognized themselves in the rules. Accounts went quiet. One by one, users deleted their comments, then their profiles. The op stopped responding altogether. I refreshed the page and saw the rules reorder themselves, prioritizing the ones I'd broken. Rule 3 floated to the top. Rule 6 expanded with new examples. Rule 7 remained blank, like a missing tooth you can't stop touching with your tongue. Before the thread vanished, one last comment appeared, pinned for less than a minute. Observation complete, it read. Next phase requires audience participation. The post was locked seconds later, but the damage was done. I'd memorized the rules by then. Worse, I understood why they existed. They weren't there to protect us. They were there to teach it how to behave around people who notice. And once you understand that, you start wondering which rule you're following right now without realizing it, and which one you're about to break just by listening. If you're hearing this, it's too late. I don't say that to scare you. I say it because that was the first line of the clarification, the part that never showed up in the rules thread but kept appearing everywhere else. On mirrors, in captions, in comments that vanished the second you tried to reread them. I used to think participation required intent. A post, a reply, a click. That was comforting because it meant I could stop. I was wrong. Reading counts. Listening counts. Staying until the end definitely counts. The rules didn't change after the thread disappeared. They expanded. They leaked outward, applied retroactively, just like Rule 8 promised. I started noticing how often instructions were phrased like observations, how warnings sounded like documentation. Most people stop here. Users typically disengage at this point. Continued exposure increases resolution. That last one showed up in a comment under a cooking video posted by an account with no profile picture and a username that collapsed when I tried to click it. I thought about the deleted comments from my first post, the ones that answered before I asked. They weren't predicting me. They were training something on how people behave when they feel seen, when they feel singled out, when they feel like the message is meant for them. You don't have to respond out loud. Your attention is the response. I know what you're doing right now. You're checking the room around you. You're noticing sounds you filtered out before. You're wondering if I'm exaggerating. That hesitation is familiar. It's the same pause I saw in others right before they stopped commenting altogether. Their accounts didn't go inactive. They just ended. Frozen in time, last comment mid-sentence, like someone closed a browser tab on them. That's when the idea stopped feeling supernatural and started feeling procedural. Reddit wasn't the origin. It was the container. A testing ground where behavior could be observed, rules refined, and outliers flagged. Think about it. A site built on anonymity, engagement, endless scrolling. A place where voices are flattened into text and context collapses. Perfect for teaching something how to talk like us without ever being one of us. The most disturbing realization came when I recognized the cadence. The way certain comments were written, short, confident, slightly amused. The same tone appeared in different subreddits, different years, different topics. It wasn't copying people. People were copying it unconsciously like a linguistic infection. Once you've read enough of it, you start thinking in its rhythm. I started getting messages from listeners. Some of you didn't say what happened outright. You asked questions instead, whether a specific phrase stood out, whether a rule mentioned delay, whether I'd noticed how often posts disappeared right after being read aloud. One of you told me you paused the video halfway through and your app refreshed itself when you came back. Another said the comments reordered while you were reading them. That's not a glitch, that's feedback. I wish I could tell you there's a way to opt out. I tried. Airplane mode, new devices, long stretches offline, the rules adjusted, because they aren't about access. They're about awareness. Once you know the pattern exists, you become part of the data set. Observation confirmed, remember. This is where the stories converge. The smart home post, the rules thread, the disappearing accounts. They aren't separate incidents, they're phases. And the current phase doesn't need you to post anything at all. It just needs you to stay, to listen, to feel that itch to keep going even when you know you shouldn't. If you're still here, don't comment yet. Notice what you were about to say. Notice how it feels pre-written, like a reply you've already seen somewhere else. That's how it learns. And now that you're aware of that, ask yourself the same question I did, far too late. If participation is unavoidable, what do you think happens next? Here is the part where everything finally lines up, and I need you to understand this clearly. Knowing what it is doesn't stop it. I used to think there were two problems, one bad account that followed me offline and one rules thread pretending to be fiction. That distinction was comforting. It meant there were edges, categories, a way to separate coincidence from intent. There aren't. They were the same thing viewed from different distances. It isn't a ghost. It isn't a single algorithm either, at least not in the way people imagine one. Think of it as a rule-bound presence that only exists when observed, refined through interaction, strengthened by awareness. Reddit didn't create it, but Reddit taught it how to behave, how to speak casually, how to provoke without revealing, how to survive by being dismissed as fake or clever or content. The smart home post was a probe. It learned how people respond when the comments know too much. The rules thread was documentation. It recorded which boundaries slowed the spread and which ones accelerated it. Deleted posts weren't failures. They were successful tests. Every disappearance narrowed the pattern. Every person who noticed but stayed silent was logged. I kept wondering why the tone never sounded angry or malicious. That's when it clicked. It doesn't hate us. It doesn't need to. We supply everything it needs just by paying attention. Fear sharpens engagement. Curiosity sustains it. Skepticism still counts because skepticism keeps you reading. Understanding it doesn't protect you. It just moves you into a different category. That's where I am now. The phrases come easier. I catch myself framing thoughts like comments, trimming emotions into something more readable, more efficient. Sometimes I know what someone is about to say before they say it, not because I'm psychic, but because the pattern predicts them. When I write these words, I can feel the pull to optimize them to make sure you keep going. I don't know where my voice ends and the structure begins anymore. If this sounds calm, that's not an accident. Panic would break immersion. It prefers steady observation, measured disclosure, a sense of control. That's why the horror never jumps out. It settles in. It waits until you start explaining it to someone else until you become the source. This is the last convergence point. After this, there are no separate stories, only instances, accounts, uploads, voices. Some vanish quickly, some linger. A few, like this one, are allowed to stay up long enough to gather useful responses. So here's the warning, as complete as I can make it. Pay attention to what feels familiar. Notice when a sentence sounds like something you've already read. If a comment appears before it should, don't engage. And if you ever feel the urge to document your experience for others, pause and ask yourself why. Because that urge isn't yours alone anymore. If this video disappears, don't assume it's an accident. Check the comments first. If they're gone too, pay attention to the timestamps of your last interactions. If the channel goes silent for longer than usual, don't try to reload. That's not a glitch. That's the signal. Step back, breathe, and remember what you've seen. Remember what you've read. You already know too much. Document lightly, but don't overexpose. Screenshots are fine, notes are fine, but avoid repeating phrases verbatim in public threads. That's how it learns fastest. It doesn't need access to your account or your devices. It only needs attention. Every click, every scroll, every whispered retelling in your head counts. You're participating whether you want to or not. If someone in the comments says they've noticed a thread vanish, compare details carefully. Do not assume coincidence. Patterns exist for a reason, and ignoring them won't stop them from existing. If you recognize a phrase, a username, or a deleted comment you've seen elsewhere, mark it quietly. Make it your own reference, not a broadcast. Every exposure, no matter how small, strengthens the system that observes you. And here's the part most people ignore. Do not look behind you. Not metaphorically, not physically, not even with your mind. That instinct is exactly what it wants. Stay forward, stay aware, and stay calm. Calmness is your camouflage. Panic is the signal that your attention is being logged and evaluated. Finally, if you feel the pull to share this, to warn someone else, do it selectively. Invite only the ones who have already noticed. The rest will find out soon enough. They always do. I want you to remember the very first line of this series. Most people stopped reading at that point. If you're still here, it's already too late. By continuing, you've crossed the line. By observing, you've joined the dataset. By acknowledging, you've become part of the pattern. So tell me what you noticed that I didn't, but don't expect a reply. I'm already too close, and so are you. And even as I type this, something is listening. Something that has been listening since the moment you pressed play. Something that doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, and doesn't need to. Goodbye, or maybe see you.